Good morning and welcome to Let's Talk. Thank you for joining us for this half hour. Now, let's talk.
And good morning and welcome to Let's Talk. I'm Tracey Morgan. Always nice to have you around this time of day, just about, 11:15 or so. That means that we have 30 minutes to sit and chat, so that'll be good. And today's program is going to be very, very interesting because we're talking about, you know how the marijuana dispensary the dispensaries, I should say, have been in the news. And we've been talking about that a lot lately. Oh, now we're going to be talking about the cards that you would need in order to go there. All right, so with us today is the CMO co-founder of what's called Compassionate Certification Centers. Dr. Brian Donner is with us. Doctor, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Tracy. How are you?
Good. Thank you for being here because we have a lot of questions.
Thanks for having me. Happy to participate.
Now, this is new to a lot of us, even though we've heard the terminology out there, we've heard the subject matter out there, but I don't think a lot of us understand what really is going on. So tell us what it is that your company does that's a piece of this puzzle that we're hearing.
Sure, and I'd be happy to tell you. So basically our company, what we are is a full-service, I would say, medical cannabis healthcare organization. So what we do is we run brick-and-mortar clinics here in Pennsylvania, where we're able to see patients, help take them through the medical marijuana program, the state process, help them obtain their medical marijuana certification and card, and then also provide ongoing support and care services. So really we function like any other doctor's office, just with a real focus and specialty on medical marijuana.
Okay, so then clarify what I said earlier, because if you're talking about the cards, are you talking the cards for the businesses, the dispensaries, the locations, your brick and mortar stores to stay in business, or are you processing the cards for people to come and be able to access the products?
Yeah, great question. So the short answer is the actual patient card. So for patients to actually be able to access the medical cannabis products. So when you look at the state medical marijuana programs, there's a definitive delineation between the state laws and the federal laws, right? So currently, on a federal standpoint, medical marijuana or marijuana in general is still considered illegal. It's a Schedule I substance. However, on a state level, the medical cannabis program can be legal, and that's what's going on in Pennsylvania. So in order for a patient to obtain medical marijuana, they need to first be certified. And when we say certified, that involves the patient actually obtaining a medical marijuana certification or ID card, which then enables them to go to the dispensary and obtain the medication.
So if federal laws are different than state laws, can you get in trouble if you buy legally at one location, and then let's say you fly across the country because you're on vacation or something like that, or you go home? Maybe you're on vacation and then you actually go home. Is there any legal trouble for you when you get to another location?
Yeah, so this is a great question. So, and to answer, obviously, I'm a doctor and not an attorney, but I would say this: when you look at the current laws when it comes to medical marijuana, they are state-regulated laws, and still federally, cannabis would be considered Schedule I or illegal. So, technically, if you took any cannabis products, even if they were medicinal, across state lines, even if it was in from one legal state to another legal state, that could be considered in violation of the federal law. So typically now, to all of our patients, our formal advice is to not travel out of state with any medical cannabis products.
Then review for us, if you would, since your focus is, of course, on health for an individual, and of course you're in this end of the medical field, if you will, or you're focusing on this. Tell us about the qualifying conditions that somebody has to have in order to obtain some of the products.
Yes, absolutely. So in Pennsylvania, there's currently 21 qualifying conditions. We had started off with 17 conditions, and the State Advisory Board has since added 4 conditions on there. I won't go through all 21 of them individually, but these can vary greatly. So the most common qualifying condition that we see from patients would be chronic pain. And really the definition of chronic pain is anything that's causing consistent pain that's been present for greater than 3 months. Some of the other qualifying conditions include cancer, which includes remission therapy, PTSD, autism, ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, MS, sort of neurodegenerative disorders such as Parkinson's disease. And then also one of the biggest ones most recently has been the addition for opiate reduction or opiate substitution therapy, where patients are actually able to obtain their medical marijuana certification as an alternative to opiate-reducing medications such as Suboxone or methadone or things like that. So really the conditions vary. Some of them are very specific, such as ALS. Some of them can be a little bit more broad, such as neuropathy, right? But there's a full 21 conditions. Those can be found anytime by going to the state website, which somebody can just search Pennsylvania Medical Marijuana Program or Pennsylvania Department of Health Medical Marijuana Program.
So, doctor, what is the process then in getting a card? Do we go to our PCP first? Do we go to a specialist first? How do we apply for the card? How do we get the card?
Yes, so another great question, Tracy. And the process sometimes can be a little bit cumbersome and somewhat difficult, so we can walk through all of the steps. So the first thing to know is that not every doctor can certify patients for medical marijuana. So in order for a physician to be able to certify patients, they need to go through a 4-hour mandatory continuing education class that's been designed and mandated by the state. Once they take that class, then the physician can then be listed on what's called the Physician Medical Marijuana Registry, which at that point they are then able to evaluate patients and certify them for medical marijuana. So it's very important that patients ask their family doctor or their specialist if they're able to do this, because in most cases the majority of physicians are not on the medical marijuana registry. The next step after that is for the patient to get registered on the State Department of Health registry, and this is all done online through a process. And once the patient is then registered on the state, they're able to get evaluated by a physician who is on the state registry. Assuming they have a qualifying condition and medical marijuana would be an appropriate condition, that physician will then certify the patient for medical marijuana, at which point the patient will receive an actual medical marijuana identification card in the mail, and they will take that to the dispensary, and that's what it enables to them to get into the dispensary and then to obtain their medication.
Okay, so I may have missed this. I'm sorry if I did. Did you say there's a photo on that particular card? Because my question is going to be, how are these cards not misused? I mean, what if you have, we'll say, a twin out there, or maybe you have a best friend that looks like you? How is it that somebody would have this card and it not be misused by another person?
Absolutely, and I think avoiding diversion was really one of the top priorities when you're talking about initiating this program. So in Pennsylvania, it's actually linked to PennDOT, right, in the Department of Motor Vehicles. So in order to register as a patient in Pennsylvania, you will either have to have a Pennsylvania driver's license or a Pennsylvania state ID card. Once basically then the information is pulled from that database at PennDOT. So whenever the patient receives their actual medical marijuana ID card, it will have the same photo of them that's on their driver's license or ID card, as well as other identifying information, including birth date and things like that. Whenever you go to the dispensary, the staff at the dispensary will not only ask for your medical marijuana identification card, but also for your state identification card or driver's license in order to further confirm your identity. But there is an actual picture of the patient on the medical marijuana card.
What if you're not able to drive anymore? What if you don't have a license? Does that affect if you can or cannot get one of these cards?
So it's yes, and it's been difficult because there's not only about having a license, but the whole program is done online. So how about if you don't have a computer and can't get on and register? Mm-hmm. How about if you don't have an email address, right? So all of these things have sort of reared their heads as problems. The great thing has been the Department of Health has been very responsive about these issues, and in particular about working fixes in real time. So they've been very good about fixing these issues as they come up.
All right, doctor, I'm glad you're with us today because it gets very confusing. This is not the first conversation we've had about this topic on this show, and yet it's still a lot of information to take in and understand. And I've asked this of, I'll probably keep asking this of everyone that I can, because you hear terminology like hemp and then CBD, and then you continue to say medical marijuana and how that would be different than marijuana. And then there's, hemp oil. I mean, explain the terminology. What is the safe stuff, if you will? Why is this safe, and why isn't it not marijuana that people continually have that stereotype in their brain?
Right, absolutely, and there's a lot of gray area with this, Tracy. I think there's been a lot of somewhat disinformation, and there's also lack of sort of a generalized education when it comes to cannabis, right? So I would say, sort of technically, to start off, that I would generally refer to this as cannabis more than anything else, and cannabis being that species of plant, right? So whenever you talk about the different species of plants, there's different species of the cannabis plant. There's some cannabis indica, cannabis sativa, right? And whenever you break down into a lot of what patients what gets really confusing is when you talk about hemp products or CBD products versus what we would call, I guess, full spectrum medical marijuana. And the difference lies really sort of in the genetics of the plant. So when you talk about hemp, by definition, hemp is a cannabis species, but what it is, it's very, very low in THC and it's more rich in CBD. And THC and CBD are what we call cannabinoids, and these are the active ingredients in cannabis, okay? So when you look at hemp, what is hemp? Hemp is basically a form of cannabis that's very low in THC and can be high in CBD. Based off of some of the federal regulations and the Farm Bill or the Farm Act, hemp can be legally cultivated under certain circumstances. At that point, the hemp oil, or what we would say CBD, the cannabidiol, can be extracted from that hemp. So whenever patients walk into, let's say, a pharmacy or a convenience store and they see hemp oil or CBD oil, that's what they're referring to. And it's basically rich in CBD, and it doesn't have many of the other cannabinoids, in particular THC, involved in there. On the other hand of this, whenever a patient will actually go to the dispensary and after they get their medical marijuana card, that cannabis is what we would call full spectrum, meaning that it really has components of all the cannabinoids. And in particular, it can have a component of THC. Now, THC is the component in marijuana that is psychoactive. So whenever somebody uses marijuana and they get the feeling of being stoned, it's the THC in there that's doing that. Now, I'd caution people that THC, it's not the black sheep. It has some very, very good properties as well. But when you talk about really the big difference between a CBD or hemp-based product or what I would call the full-spectrum medical marijuana products at the dispensary, that's really the delineation. And hopefully I didn't confuse people more.
No, but then, again, explain what you're getting at the dispensary, again, because if you're saying it has those elements, but yet people are not feeling stoned when they're using it, is that what I understand?
Yeah, so and to piggyback off of that a little bit more, so when you look at these individual cannabinoids, so for example CBD or cannabidiol or another one like THC, there's actually over 100 of these cannabinoids, and we're still finding them. And what we have found out is that each of these cannabinoids can have a different physiological property on the body. So for example, we know that CBD is a very potent anti-inflammatory. We also know that it can be very good for sleep or anxiety, whereas conversely, THC may be better for pain, or it may be needed for appetite stimulation. So by controlling these different cannabinoids and the ratio that they are to each other, we can then control the physiological properties of medical marijuana. So one of the things that I always explain to my patients is that you don't have to get stoned to be on medical marijuana, right? Whenever a young child, an 8-year-old, comes in and sees me with seizures, there are medical marijuana preparations that can be therapeutic but are not psychoactive. So just to piggyback off your question, I guess.
Absolutely.
Does that help explain it a little bit better?
Yeah,
Okay.
Dr. Brian Donner with us, Compassionate Certification Centers. He's the CMO and co-founder with a wealth of knowledge about this and folks getting these cards and being able to buy different products.